I am here as a soldier who has temporarily left the field of battle in order to explain what civil war is like when civil war is waged by women. Suppose the men of Hertford had a grievance, and they'd laid that grievance before their legislature, and the legislature obstinately refused to listen to them or to remove their grievance. What would be the proper and the constitutional and the practical way of getting their grievance removed? Well, it is perfectly obvious. At the next general election, the men of Hertford would turn out that legislature and elect a new one. But let the men of Hertford imagine that they were not in the position of being voters at all, that they were governed without their consent being obtained, that the legislature turned an absolutely deaf ear to their demands. What would the men of Hertford do then? They couldn't vote the legislature out. They would have to make a choice of two evils. They would either have to submit indefinitely to an unjust state of affairs, or they would have to rise up. Your forefathers decided that they must have representation for taxation many, many years ago, when they felt they couldn't wait any longer, when they laid all the arguments before an obstinate British government that they could think of, when every other means had failed. They began by the Tea Party at Boston, and they went on until they had won the independence of the United States of America. We are called militant, and we are quite willing to accept the name. We are determined to press this question of the enfranchisement of women to the point where we are no longer to be ignored by the politicians. You have to make more noise than anybody else. You have to make yourself more obtrusive than anybody else. You have to fill all the papers more than anybody else. We wear no mark. We belong to every class. We permeate every class of the community from the highest to the lowest. And so you see, in the women's civil war, it is absolutely impossible to deal with it. You cannot locate it, and you cannot stop it. We have brought the government of England to this position, that it has to face this alternative. Either women are to be killed, or women are to have the vote. You won your freedom in America when you had the revolution by bloodshed, by sacrificing human life. You won the Civil War by the sacrifice of human life when you decided to emancipate the slaves. Human life for us is sacred. But we say, if any life is to be sacrificed, it shall be ours. We won't do it ourselves, but we will put the enemy in the position where they will have to choose between giving us freedom or giving us death.
Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights, the white man gonna be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as any man when I could get it. And I could bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, seen most sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with a mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? And they talk about this thing in the head. What is it they call it? Oh, that's right, yeah, intellect. That's it, honey. Well, what's that got to do with women's rights and Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint, and y'all holds a court, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? That man in the back there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Well, where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? He came from God and a woman. Man didn't have nothing to do with it. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, well, these women here together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And they asking to do it. The men better let them.
Qualified person running was a woman, and look what we did instead. I mean, that says something about where we are. You know, I forget everybody else. That's what we have to explore, because if we as women are still suspicious of one another, if we're still if we still have this crazy bar for each other that we don't have for men, yeah. If we're still doing that today, if we're not comfortable with the notion that a woman could be our president compared to what? I wish that girls could fail as bad as men do and be okay. Because let me tell you, watching men fail up, it is frustrating.
Very frustrating.
It is frustrating to see a lot of men blow it and win. Many of us have gotten ourselves at the table, but we're still too grateful to be at the table to really shake it up. You know, I think and that's not a criticism, because for so many, just getting to the table was so hard, right? And so you just holding on, just trying to, but now we have to take some risks for our girls. We have to be willing to lose a little bit of something, that we can't just holding on to our seats at the table won't be enough to help our girls be all that they can be.
For sure is that speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we all have. And I'm especially proud and inspired by all the women who have felt strong enough and empowered enough to speak up and share their personal stories. Each of us in this room are celebrated because of the stories that we tell. And this year, we became the story. But it's not just a story affecting the entertainment industry. It's one that transcends any culture, geography, race, religion, politics, or workplace. So I want tonight to express gratitude to all the women who have endured years of abuse and assault because they, like my mother, had children to feed and bills to pay and dreams to pursue.
We are here to say, as women, we're not taking it anymore. Today, not just for the Me Too's, because I was a Me Too, but when I raise my hand, I am aware of all the women who are still in silence.
And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become synonymous with man-hating. If there is one thing I know for certain, it is that this has to stop. For the record, feminism, by definition, is the belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. It is the theory of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes. And I think it is right that I am paid the same as my male counterparts. I think it is right that I should be able to make decisions about my own body. I think it is right that women be involved on my behalf in the policies and the decisions that will affect my life. I think it is right that socially I am afforded the same respect as men. And if you still hate the word, it is not the word that is important. It's the idea and the ambition behind it.
We've come a long way, ladies.